Biden won the election by Parker Yost. Once upon a time, Trump supporters pursued a lie that the 2020 presidential election was rigged. This lie began to ever expand until an insurrection was made on Capitol Hill. As fate would have it, Trump lost the election. This story is true. America as a whole is engrossed in their party's beliefs, bellowing that the elections and their results are a lie. They are wrong. Animosity towards each other has America's political system at its throat. This is volatile and dangerous. Political polarization runs rampant amongst Americans, bringing a stench so ubiquitous that others cannot understand nor interpret their actions. America's elections have represented in full transparency who won and who lost. There should be no change in the way elections run. Throughout history, there have been radical changes in America's democracy. What once was only permitted to whites owning vast amounts of land has transpired in the expansion of African Americans and women given the same rights, the right to vote. The federal government has expanded its reach to millions of people in this country, and because of that, many are now speculating whether or not each person is viable to cast a ballot. The debate surrounds whether there should be an increase in voter verification laws to help secure election results. Here is what is known thus far. Voters are informed of their requirements to vote, not denied or blinded by their state's processes. While states are completely different from their counterparts, Arizona does not bar those ineligible. Instead, it informs them. When people do not meet the requirements to vote, a letter is sent to address them. Daniel Gonzalez, a reporter for the Arizona Republic, covers electors checking with those that do not register in the Motor Vehicle Database, MVD. For those who are unaware, Arizona does require that you present a driver's license or permit to register to vote. This is sent to a processing center where they take the registration number and try to match it with federal databases. Following prior to 2016's election, Elizabeth Bartholomew, communications manager for the Maricopa County Recorder's Office, oversaw election processes. Taken in October, a month before Election Day, Bartholomew began each day pulling state voter registration forms one by one from the stack on her desk. She then typed each prospective voter's name, date of birth, and alien registration number into a Department of Homeland Security database known as SAVE, or Systematic Alien Verification for Entitlements. Within moments, the results came back as United States citizen, or for others, institute additional verification. Letters are sent out to those of the latter containing reasons as to why their vote cannot be processed and what they need to provide to verify their identity. Unfortunately, not every state processes the same kind of effort to inform. The majority of states do not inform voters ahead of time before registration deadlines, and as a result, the general population fails to voice their opinion. Not all states have the same kind of merit as Arizona does. Still, there are states out there that impede confusion to upcoming voters. Many are misled by the discrepancies states have amongst themselves. For example, Texas reissued voter education materials for the upcoming 2016 election. However, they were misleading as a federal court reversed the information being presented. As follows, the information mailed out did not explain that polling places still allow those who do not show proper documentation to be permitted if they show other acceptable means. Think of birth certificates in replacement to lost or forgotten voter ID cards. The lack of accuracy for voters to follow brings catastrophe to democracy. Originally set by the framers of the United States Constitution, states are to be responsible in conducting their own elections. States know themselves better than the overseer. John Cornyn, senator from Texas, objects the Freedom to Vote Act, one possible reform, as a compromise in any sense of the word. Moreover, he finds that the bill deteriorates state constitutional power. Unnecessary changes are made to a system that he finds is not broken for state and local run elections. Cornyn makes a viable point. Recently registering to vote in Arizona, the process is quite simple and easy. Other states should adopt tactics done in Arizona, as processes like voting by mail and registering online have always been convenient, not complicated. The processes run today are secure and safely conducted across all states. The people running as election liaisons serve their utmost abilities in delivering results honestly and truthfully to the state they abide by. Even under the highest circumstances, the results come clean. While some do know their requirements, most do not. Instead, parties are drafting bills on beliefs instead of their conscience. With Democrats spitting at Republicans and Republicans up in arms, their opinions underline the facts that are in place. From Stanford Law Review, an academic journal series discussing America's political system, we note, however, that strong majorities continue to support such laws, even though a large share of the population remains unaware of the existence of voter identification requirements. People are clueless. Backing them is a survey conducted in December 2015 by the National Conference of State Legislators, NCSL, offering insight on political trends. The observation they conducted asked, "Does your state require that voters show photo ID at the polls?" On average, 30% of those who answered had no clue. Who could blame them? Every state in this country has different requirements in order to vote. From the map, New York, California, and Illinois all have no requirements to vote, as opposed to Tennessee, Georgia, and Mississippi having the most requirements to vote. Think of these states with voter ID cards as a must, or no mail-in ballots for that matter. As of today, Arizona sits in the record books to be the most targeted. With the thought of illegal immigrants overthrowing the elections, many point to reason from the last election. Everybody was in shock when Arizona became a blue state in 2020. However, when following up on ballots that may have been scrutinized, very little has been found. An investigation to double-check millions of results tends to delay quite a bit. A span of a decade shows only 22 proven voter fraud cases, with only 15 coming from local counties, were found by Arizona's Attorney General's office. A decade is quite a long time, almost as if there is nothing wrong if not much is proven. This does not stop a burning need to reform Arizona's elections. With Biden coming before Trump by a near 0.3%, a lot of conspiracies brew to the election being rigged. Fueled by the thought of bamboo fibers and ballots submitted by Asia, Republicans in Arizona state legislators started to fire a series of bills that would increase tighter verification measures. Jake Hoffman, state representative from Queen Creek, proposed 9 bills, all to place intense barriers on voters. These barriers, being co-sponsored, would prohibit ballot drop boxes, same-day voter registration, and voting centers, amongst other things. Most plead that their bills would not suppress, but make it convenient for voters to cast. Some do intend with this message. Same-day registration would make it convenient in Arizona. Being popular among 17 states in this country, the NCSL suggests that it improves voter turnout rates by an average of about 5%. Including this method to expand registration would include those with technological limitations, the majority of which is done online here. However, doing so goes against the actions taken by representatives as a way to block illegals wedging themselves in America's democracy. Adrian Fontes, former Democratic Maricopa County recorder, opposes their bills. He finds that with recent bills trying to pass Congress, none will come across as near as the representatives intend. The negative consequences of these bills would add more confusion towards the way votes are being processed now. State Representative from Glendale, Paul Goyer, contradicts his Republican colleagues, vowing to block anything that appears radical or clearly related to the false idea that Trump won the election. Arizona, with its online registration only requiring a driver's license or permit to be given, is enough to validate someone's identity. With access to databases and cross-referencing, barely anything is falsified. With nothing substantial found, why bother? States properly administer and monitor elections with clear intentions on fair and equal voting. This very idea of disenfranchisement is part of libertarian bias. States are past their 1965 counterparts, learning from history to include others in their elections. From Chuck Grassley, senator from Iowa, he proves that record turnout has increased for minority voters. Expanding federal control over states with modest intentions misrepresents their independence. Adding more laws does not define the opportunity that people already have. Record turnouts have been increasing for all minorities without any barriers to overcome. The Voter Participation Center, a background for increasing minority turnout, reports 133 million of those who are young, colored, or unmarried women to have 60% of their demographics in the polls of the 2016 election. That is a minority becoming a supermajority. In Arizona's 2020 presidential election, about 60% of eligible black voters turned out for the contentious 2020 election, setting a new record. Black turnout was less than 50% in the 2016 election. Most argue with the processes that are already in place, nothing should change from Democratic overlords. Hans von Spakowski, part of the Center for Legal and Judicial Studies, claims that voter suppression spread across this nation is simply false. No expansion is needed to the highly acclaimed Voting Rights Act of 1965. If only that was true. The changes made by the Supreme Court ruling of Shelby County versus Holder, a monumental landmark in changing voting processes, confirms states that have racial discriminatory past no longer need pre-approval for election changes. Now with no limitations, Arizona's legislature has been making pushes to ensure better results from 2020's outcome. Attorney James Brosnahan, part of suppression investigation in the pre-civil rights era in Arizona, claimed the recent changes proposed as repeatedly attacking voters' rights with glossy words like election integrity. Republicans are embracing the big lie as a way to justify ballot machines and vote by mail as sources of continuous fraud. Recent bills have tried and failed to destroy this lie. Of those, John Lewis, Save Democracy, For the People, Freedom to Vote, and others are all attempts to pursue a new chapter in America's voice. Reading more into one of them, the For the People Act of 2021 promotes to expand Americans' access to the ballot box, reduce the influence of big money in politics, strengthen ethics rules for public servants, and implement other anti-corruption measures to fortify our democracy and for other purposes. Patrick Leahy, senator from Vermont, supports such actions as a way to improve voter turnout for neglected diversities. The Democratic members of the Senate are pushing for more federal control to stub the ongoing controversy to those who are not given the same luxury. In some states, polling sites show a record of 12 to 13 hours of waiting, with these sites as the only viable way to vote. Visual evidence depicts a tremendous line of voters waiting to cast early ballots in the 2020 presidential election in Virginia, the average temperature at that time to be 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Grueling hot summers do not pale to adaptation by states. States cannot meet every demand there is on changing turnouts, especially when most thought COVID protocols would slow things down. Surprisingly, it did not. While most work is done voluntarily, efforts to pay companies to verify the information come at a cost. Especially when the sheer magnitude of ballots scurry in, many workers are busy as they try to cope with the onslaught. A total of $747,778 was to be added to Arizona's overtime cost in efforts to make room for verifying voters. With poll workers being an unpaid position, some discredit it as election day falls on a workday. A lack of total employees follows a lack of more polling sites. Despite this, voters continue to show up, with record turnouts following then after. A continuous trend shows America's turnout has risen to 66.7%. From 2016, 5% has grown. Challenges do not deter people from going through the process. Recent changes taken on by the precedent of Shelby County versus Holder have indeed changed the way states operate elections. The human race is better than this. Known for adapting and surviving on top of the food chain, the change in polling locations should be the same. Despite some limitations, states do their due diligence in optimizing their elections. While the amount of counter-evidence demands some sort of reform, the process that is held as of today is as secure and reliable to every person in this country. Sometimes trying to make something bipartisan starts to swing to either side of the political spectrum. Never should the term voting be political. That alone is not inclusive to all of the American people. The discrepancy of this needs to stop. The information out there needs to be taken with validation, not falsification. The world deserves the truth. Red and blue, Republican and Democrat, all American. Whether each side is opposite, they all vote together. America must unify, not deny. The elections are real and as true as they can be. With that said, there should be nothing done to change voter verification.